The moment she locked eyes with me, her lipstick smudged. She hadn't even noticed it. She was smiling, big, polished, perfect, standing next to a man who definitely wasn't me, clapping along with the rest of the crowd as Braden's name echoed through the speakers. And then, she saw me. She froze. The applause faded from her hands like she'd forgotten how they worked. Her polished posture wilted just slightly, like someone had pulled an invisible thread through her spine. She blinked, once, twice, then tried to pretend like she hadn't just seen a ghost. But I saw it. The crack. For years. No contact. No apology. Not a single, "How's he doing?" Or, "Did he get taller?" She left like a coward and lived like none of it ever happened. I was just the inconvenient origin story she edited out of her new life. Until now. Now I stood 3 rows behind her. No warning. No announcement. No message beforehand. She didn't know I'd be there. Because for 4 years, I let her believe I'd disappeared. She was wrong. And today? Today, I wanted her to remember exactly who I was. I didn't come to make a scene. I didn't come to reclaim anything. I came to witness, to be present in the one moment that belonged to Braden, and only him. But even that, even just standing there, breathing in her perfectly curated world, was enough to make her unravel. She whispered something into the man's ear beside her. He turned. His expression flickered with confusion, then curiosity, and finally irritation. As if I was a stain on the glass of their perfect picture. But I didn't move, didn't flinch. Because I wasn't the one who should be embarrassed. I wasn't the one who slept in a clean bed while my son cried himself to sleep. I wasn't the one who said, "I'll only be gone a few days," and then mail the divorce packet through a stranger. She was. And now? She couldn't escape the ending of a story she thought she rewrote. The funny part is, Braden saw me too, but he didn't react the way she expected. He paused after his name was called. Right there on stage, diploma in hand, he spotted me, the man who stayed, who listened, who failed and apologized and kept showing up anyway. And for the first time in 4 years, he smiled at me. It wasn't big. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real. And that did something to her face I'll never forget. Her hand twitched toward Braden like she wanted to call him. But he turned away before she could. And in that tiny second, a second so fragile and silent I could have snapped it in half, I knew something she didn't. This was just the beginning. She looked away first. That used to be my role, the one who backed down, who apologized too fast, who cleaned up the silence she left behind like it was spilled milk. But not this time. I didn't blink. I let her see me, really see me, for the first time in years. And whatever story she'd been telling herself to sleep at night, it started to unravel right there in row D. The ceremony moved on. Names were called. Caps were tossed. Everyone smiled for pictures. Everyone except her. I watched her from behind, because I didn't need to be up front to make a statement. I wasn't part of her world anymore, but I was still a part of our son's. That alone was enough to make her squirm. When Braden stepped off the stage, he walked straight toward me. Not to her. Not to the guy in the tailored suit she came with, who, by the way, had the kind of jawline that only comes with gym memberships and dental veneers. Braden didn't even glance at them. He came to me, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like an afterthought in my own life. "Hey," he said, voice low, trying not to crack. "I didn't think you'd come." I almost didn't, I whispered, handing him the gift bag with the ceramic muck. But then I remembered I raised a kid who made it anyway. He looked inside the bag and laughed. "You still do that thing where you wrap everything in newspaper?" "Some habits die slower than others," I said, smiling in a way I hadn't in months. That's when she approached. I saw her shadow before I heard her voice. "Braden," she said, tone sweet, too sweet, like syrup over something sour. "Can we talk?" "Alone." Braden's posture changed instantly. That little smile he'd managed to find around me vanished like smoke. His jaw tightened. "About what?" She glanced at me like I was something sticky stuck to her shoe. "I haven't seen you in so long. I want to explain." "You had 4 years to explain," he said. Quietly, calmly, brutally. Her lips parted. No sound came out. The man next to her finally stepped in. "Hey, I think maybe we should all take a minute. Emotions are high, but this isn't the place." He said it like he was managing the situation. Like we were a business meeting he was trying to close early. I turned toward him slowly, took in the expensive watch, the cologne that hit the air before his voice even did, the way he stood like the world was supposed to shift for him. And I said, "You're right. This isn't the place." Then I handed Braden a small, sealed envelope. "Give this a read when you're ready. No pressure. Just, if you're ever curious about what really happened. He took it carefully, like it might break. Her face? It went pale. She knew what that envelope meant. She tried to speak again, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the way Braden turned his back, or the fact that I didn't flinch when she glared at me, didn't shrink when her boyfriend tried to puff up like he was going to say more. But nothing was said. She stood there, arms slack, mouth slightly open, and watched us walk away together. It was just a few feet toward the exit, but it felt like reclaiming an entire lifetime. I wasn't the one who ran anymore. I wasn't the man she left behind. And as I pushed open the glass doors, I saw something reflected in them. Not just my son walking beside me, not just the look on her face, but a man approaching from the parking lot, mid-40s, faded navy blazer, holding a camera case and scanning the crowd like he was looking for someone very specific. And when his eyes met mine, he smiled. A cold, knowing smile. Then he walked straight toward me and said the last thing I expected to hear. "You're Daryl, right? Alina's ex-husband?" I blinked, caught off guard. Yeah. Do I know you?" "No. But I know what she did," he said, glancing toward the building. "And I think it's time someone else did too." He said it so casually, like someone asking if I knew the weather, but it landed like a hammer on the back of my neck. "I know what she did." His voice wasn't aggressive, but there was an edge behind it, the kind of tone that carries weight without shouting. I stood there for a second, unsure if I'd misheard or if this stranger had really just emerged from the shadows of my past with something I hadn't asked for, yet somehow needed. Before I could respond, he extended his hand. "Name's Colt. Colt Henley. I used to work with Alina. In Chicago. She might have mentioned me, though I doubt it. She hadn't. Not once. Then again, I wasn't exactly her confessional booth before she vanished." Braden stood beside me, clutching the envelope I'd given him, eyes bouncing between Colt and me. "Dad," he said quietly, uncertain. "It's okay," I muttered, more to myself than to him. "Go wait in the car. I'll be there in a minute." Braden hesitated, but eventually walked off toward the parking lot. He didn't ask questions. He was good at that, at reading the temperature and retreating before it boiled over, a habit he picked up after too many years of eggshell floors. Colt waited until my son was out of earshot before he said anything else. "I debated whether to even come here today," he started, glancing toward the building where Alina and her suited trophy still lingered. "But when I saw your name on the attendee list, well, I figured if there was ever a time to bring this into the light, it's now." "You're going to have to be a hell of a lot clearer than that," I said, trying to keep my voice from cracking. "Because unless you're here to sell me insurance, I don't know why someone from her work would drive 5 hours to this town just to drop cryptic sentences on me in a parking lot." He gave a short laugh, not the amused kind, but the sad, tired kind that comes when someone's been holding on to something toxic for far too long. "Because she ruined more than one life, Daryl. And because I didn't know how bad it really got until I saw the photos." Photos. That word stuck in my chest like a splinter. Colt opened his bag slowly and pulled out a padded folder. Nothing fancy. Just worn black leather with a broken zipper. Inside were a few pages and a thumb drive. He handed both to me. "I didn't want to mail them," he explained. "Too risky. I didn't know who'd open it. But I thought you deserved the truth. Especially if she's pretending to be a saint around your kid." I didn't want to look. Not right away. My fingers hovered over the folder like it might bite me. But Colt continued talking, like he needed to get this out before his conscience changed its mind. "She started something with our department director 3 years before she left you. Not just flirting. I mean meetings in hotel rooms during conferences, weekend getaways disguised as training sessions. She told people she was in a loveless marriage. Said you were boring, controlling, emotionally manipulative." I flinched at that last one. Not because it was true, but because it wasn't. And hearing it, even secondhand, made me feel like someone had spit on everything I'd ever done for her. "But here's the twist," Colt added. "She wasn't just cheating. She was documenting it." My eyes snapped to his. "What the hell does that mean?" "She was filming them," he said. "Some kind of twisted power trip. Stored it all on a private server under a fake name, probably for leverage. He found out eventually, the director, and fired her quietly. Paid her off. Company swept it under the rug. But not before someone backed up the files." I looked down at the drive in my hand. It felt heavier than it should have. "And you're giving this to me now. Why?" Colt's face darkened. "Because I lost my job over it. Because I defended her. Because I believed her when she cried in the break room and said she was the victim. And because I saw your son's name on one of the folders, like some kind of sick placeholder for what she said she was leaving behind. I don't know what she's told the world, but I've carried this poison long enough. You do whatever you want with it. Burn it, bury it, expose it. But now it's yours. Before I could speak, he turned and walked away. No final statement. No demand for thanks. Just a man who looked like he'd been drowning in silence for too long and had finally decided to come up for air. I sat in the driver's seat with the folder in my lap, hands trembling. Braden was already buckled in beside me, earbuds in, staring out the window like the last hour hadn't just cracked open every illusion we both had about the past. And still, I didn't open the folder. Not yet. Because the truth, the full, unfiltered, undeniable truth, was something I couldn't face in a parking lot. But I could already hear the storm rumbling behind it. I didn't sleep that night. I laid in bed with the folder resting on my chest like a warning label, the USB drive beside it, untouched, burning a silent hole through the mattress. Braden had gone straight to his room after dinner, barely speaking, just a quick thanks before disappearing behind the door. I could tell he was trying not to process what he saw at the ceremony. I didn't blame him. Some things don't compute right away, especially not when you're 18, standing between two lives you never asked to choose from. But I wasn't a kid. I didn't have the luxury of looking away. So at 2:12 a.m., I sat on the edge of my bed, slipped the USB drive into my old work laptop, and clicked the folder labeled simply, Exhibit. It opened in seconds, and just like that, my past exploded across the screen. There were videos, dozens of them, all time-stamped. Some had names. Some didn't. Some were nothing more than muted clips inside hotel rooms, dimly lit offices, or back seats of parked cars. Faces blurred, sometimes cropped, but one thing was consistent. Alina was in every single one. Calm, pleased, in control. I skipped past most of it. I didn't need to see her being intimate with strangers. I wasn't a masochist. But there was one folder buried halfway through, labeled January, Transition. It was the only one with a subfolder named Braden. My hands hovered over the trackpad, trembling. I shouldn't have clicked it. Every part of me screamed not to. But I couldn't not know. I needed to understand what Colt meant when he said my son's name was a placeholder. Inside were screenshots, not of Braden himself, but of text threads between Alina and someone else. The name was saved as R. No photo. Just a string of conversations that made my skin go cold. R. So what's the next move? Alina. I'm going. Finally. Just need to leave quietly. R. What about the kid? Alina. He's like Daryl. Soft. He'll get over it. Besides, it's not like he ever liked me much. R. Still, you sure he's not a liability? Alina. Braden's a sweet idiot. He worships his dad. He'll adapt. I read the messages 3 times. He's like Daryl. Soft. He'll get over it. She was talking about our son like he was luggage she didn't feel like carrying anymore. Disposable. Replaceable. My stomach twisted. I closed the laptop and nearly threw it across the room, but stopped myself. Instead, I pressed my palms against my eyes and just sat there. For hours. Until dawn cracked through the blinds and burned away any hope of rest. By morning, something inside me had shifted. Not rage. Not revenge. Just clarity. I wasn't going to tell Braden yet. I needed more. Not just for me, but for him. He deserved a complete picture, not just fragments of rot. So I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Victor Townsend. He was Alina's cousin. The only one from her side of the family who ever treated me like a human being instead of a boring pit stop in her glittery, chaotic life. We'd fallen out of touch after the divorce, but I found his number buried in an old email and took a chance. He picked up after 2 rings. Daryl. Yeah. Hey. Sorry to call out of the blue. He paused. It's not that out of the blue. I heard about the graduation. Figured you'd show. She was not thrilled. That made me chuckle, bitter and brief. Did she tell you anything about me? Depends on when you mean. She used to say you were solid. Dependable. Then suddenly you were suffocating and dull. Honestly, I always thought it was projection. Vic, I said carefully, do you know anyone named Colt Henley? Silence. Then, yeah, I do. He was in compliance. Fired around the same time she vanished from the company. There were rumors. Ugly ones. But nobody would say anything on record. Why? I met him. He gave me material. Proof. Stuff I shouldn't have, probably. Victor exhaled sharply. You need to be careful. Alina has this way of flipping a narrative so fast it'll make you question your own memories. If you're holding proof, you better be ready to carry the consequences. I'm not afraid of her anymore, I said. And I meant it. But still, there was hesitation in my gut. Not fear, just weariness. I'd spent so long rebuilding something steady for Braden. I didn't want to light it on fire just to prove a point. Listen, Victor said after a moment. I shouldn't tell you this, but she's planning something. She's trying to get partial custody again. Said she wants to rebuild a relationship with her son. But I've seen her patterns, Daryl. This isn't about Braden. It's about cleaning up her image. Custody. I nearly laughed. After 4 years of radio silence? She's got people whispering in her ear, he said. PR types. Lawyers. Her new guy has influence. And money. Great. Look, Victor said. If you want to meet, I'll tell you everything I know. But not on the phone. I've already said too much. I agreed. We picked a spot, a quiet diner just off the freeway, 2 towns over. I had no idea that the next time I saw Victor, he'd hand me something that would change everything I thought I knew. Not just about Alina, but about my own son. The diner Victor chose was one of those places that hadn't changed in 30 years, where the linoleum floors still squeaked and the air smelled like bacon grease and old coffee. The kind of place where people passed through but never lingered. It was perfect. He was already seated when I arrived, hunched over a menu he clearly wasn't reading, tapping one finger against the edge of a sugar dispenser. When he looked up and saw me, he didn't smile, just nodded, like we were 2 veterans meeting after a long war, and neither of us wanted to pretend we came out of it clean. I slid into the booth and didn't waste time. You said she's coming for custody? Victor leaned back. She's been in meetings. Strategic ones. You know that guy she brought to the graduation? Hard to forget. His name's Dalton Pierce. Owns a consulting firm, manages image rehab campaigns for corporate execs. She's his latest project and his girlfriend. He's helping her frame a narrative. I scoffed. Let me guess. The single mother who fought her way back after escaping an emotionally distant husband? Close. Try. The misunderstood career woman forced to leave an unstable household to protect her child. I felt my jaw tighten. Unstable. Victor reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a plain white envelope. That's not even the worst part. I came across this 3 months ago. It was mailed to me by accident, probably meant for her father, who moved a while ago. I was going to toss it, but curiosity got the better of me. He slid the envelope across the table. Read it. And brace yourself. My hands were already shaking when I picked it up. Inside was a medical form. It looked official, hospital letterhead, date stamped 2 decades ago. My eyes scanned the page until they landed on the bolded section. Paternity evaluation result. Probability of paternity, 0%. Mother, Alina Penrose. Alleged father, Daryl R. Penrose. Child, Braden Penrose. Result, excluded. I stared at it like it might morph into something else if I just blinked hard enough. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't blink. Couldn't even feel the seat under me. Everything just disappeared. It was like falling down an elevator shaft, sudden, endless, and deafeningly silent. No, I whispered. No, this can't be real. I was there when he was born. I know, Victor said softly. That's why I sat on it for months. I didn't want to believe it either. But the dates match. The doctor's office checks out. I even called, pretending to verify for insurance reasons. It's legitimate. But why now? I asked. Why is this just surfacing now? He shrugged. Maybe it was never supposed to. Maybe she was keeping it hidden in case she needed leverage. Maybe she told someone who got sloppy. I don't know. But what I do know is that Dalton's people are building a case. They're arguing that you're not Braden's biological father, that you have no legal claim if she petitions for full parental rights. I sat back, stunned, replaying everything I'd ever done for that kid. The bedtime stories. The science fairs. The late-night hospital visits when he had asthma attacks. The Christmas mornings where I wrapped gifts with shaking hands, praying I'd scrape together enough to make him feel loved. All of it, under threat. All of it suddenly questionable, because of blood I didn't know I didn't share. I don't care what that test says, I muttered, my voice low but burning. He's my son. Victor nodded. And you better prepare to fight for him like he is. Because Alina's building an image, and she's good at playing innocent. If she flips the story, the courts might lean toward reunification. Especially if she paints you as emotionally unstable. I felt sick. Not just because of the betrayal, but because deep down, part of me had always feared something like this. There were nights when Braden was little, when Alina would get distant, shut down, pick fights over nothing, that I wondered if there was something unspoken between us. Something I wasn't allowed to know. But I pushed it down. I told myself trust was stronger than doubt. I was wrong. We sat in silence for a while. Victor didn't press. He just let me absorb it, let the grief morph into whatever it needed to. I don't know how long we stayed there, but eventually I looked up at him and asked the only question that mattered. Does Braden know? No, he said. And if you want my opinion? You don't tell him yet. Not until you're sure he's ready. Not until you have something solid to counter what Alina's planning. I nodded, numb. On the drive home, I thought about all the little moments, Braden's laugh, his stubbornness, the way he bites his lower lip when he's nervous. None of that was genetic. It was something deeper, something real, something earned. And I would not let her take that away from me. But I wasn't prepared for what waited for me when I got back. Braden was sitting on the porch. The envelope I had locked in my desk drawer, the one Colt had given me, was open in his hands. He looked up at me, eyes hollow, voice shaking. Who is this man Mom's with in all these photos? He wasn't angry, not in the way I expected. He wasn't screaming, throwing the photos, accusing me of hiding something. No, what I saw in Braden's face was worse than rage. It was confusion. Quiet, shaking, deeply human confusion that wrapped around his voice and held his shoulders stiff. I stood there on the porch like I was trespassing on my own property, and for a few seconds, all I could do was look at him, still holding that envelope like it had been leaking poison into his veins all afternoon. I didn't mean for you to see those yet, I said carefully, walking toward him like someone approaching a wounded animal. I was going to tell you. I didn't know how. Braden didn't move. I recognized her, obviously. But the guy, he's all over these. And they're not just photos. There's video. You knew about this. I sat down on the step beside him, leaving a space between us that felt like a canyon. Yeah, a man named Colt brought them to me. Said he used to work with your mom. He thought I deserved to know the truth. I didn't want you caught in the middle of this, Bray. That was never the plan. He looked down at the photos again, fingers clenching them tighter. You mean the truth about how she left us, or the truth about how she was lying to both of us before that? My heart sank. Both. He nodded slowly, eyes distant. And you were just going to carry it all on your own? I've been carrying it for years, I whispered. Since the day she walked out, I've been doing my best to hold the pieces together without shattering you in the process. But I guess I underestimated how much you've already figured out on your own. He finally looked at me then. Really looked. So who is that guy? The one she brought to graduation. That's him, isn't it? The one from the videos. I hesitated. His name's Dalton Pierce. He's more than just a boyfriend. He's helping her build a legal case. She's trying to get custody. Braden's face changed. Not shocked this time. Something colder. She wants custody now? She wants to rewrite everything, I said. To come back into your life on her terms. With lawyers. With lies. With a story that paints me as someone I've never been. He stared at the porch railing for a long time before speaking again. You know. I waited for her. For months. I kept thinking maybe she was just figuring stuff out. That maybe she'd call. I left my phone on at night. Even slept with it under my pillow. I thought maybe I'd done something wrong. Braden, I started. But he raised his hand. I know I didn't. Now. But back then, I needed something to blame. And since she was gone, you were the only one left. I hated how quiet you were. How you never trashed her. Never yelled. I thought it meant you didn't care. My throat tightened. I kept quiet because I was scared if I said what I really felt, it would destroy whatever pieces of her you had left. He exhaled shakily. She already did that. Silence wrapped around us like fog. The kind that blurs the world and muffles everything. I didn't know what to say to make it better. Maybe there wasn't anything. Maybe this wasn't a moment for healing. Just one for honesty. Finally, he folded the envelope closed and said, So what now? I looked out across the street, at the empty sidewalk, the wind pushing old leaves in circles. Now we prepare. She's coming with a plan. But we don't have to just react. We can choose what happens next. Braden tilted his head. You mean, like, a legal plan? That, and more, I said, reaching into my jacket and pulling out Victor's envelope. There's something else. Something I didn't want to believe. And before I show it to you, I need you to understand one thing. I turned toward him fully. You are my son. I don't care what paperwork says. I don't care who shares your blood. I've been here. I've raised you. I've failed, and I've learned, and I've stayed. Nothing changes that. Not now, not ever. Braden's eyes were glassy. Okay, He whispered. Show me. I handed it to him. Slowly. Carefully. He opened it, eyes scanning the page. The silence stretched again, longer this time, until finally, he asked, She's known this since I was born? She kept it from both of us, I said. She had the test done privately. I never saw it until last week. He stared at the results, then down at his hands. So, I don't even know who I am. You know exactly who you are, I said. You're the kid who stayed up past midnight working on robotics builds with duct tape and hope. You're the kid who cried when your first dog died and then spent all night making a shoebox coffin with glitter pins. You're the kid who made me believe in something again after I didn't think I had anything left. You're Braden, my son. And then he did something I wasn't prepared for. He leaned over, rested his head on my shoulder, and let himself break for just a moment. I wrapped my arm around him and didn't say a word. I just held him while the truth sank in. But peace doesn't last long in stories like ours. Because the very next morning, a formal letter arrived. On embossed letterhead. From Alina's attorney. Requesting immediate mediation for reunification and partial custody of her biological son. The letter was printed on creamy, expensive paper, thick enough to feel more like a threat than a document. The embossed seal at the top glared at me like a smirk frozen in gold. I didn't even need to open it to know what it said. But I did. And every line inside it read like a direct punch to the gut. The client, Ms. Alina Penrose, intends to pursue partial custody of her biological child, Braden Pierce, biological child. They had already stripped my name out of the conversation. They had taken 40,000 hours of my life, bedtimes, school projects, scraped knees, doctor visits, and reduced me to a placeholder in their version of the story. I sat at the kitchen table, the letter spread out beside a half-drunk cup of black coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Braden was still asleep upstairs, or at least pretending to be. We'd barely spoken since he read the paternity document. The silence between us wasn't angry. It was just heavy. Like we were both carrying something too big to hold at once and didn't know how to pass it back and forth without dropping it. I called Victor. He answered immediately. She moved fast, I said. The ink on her comeback story isn't even dry, and she's already gunning for the courtroom. She's always been strategic, Victor replied. But she's also careless when she feels cornered. That's her blind spot. You just need to widen it. What does that even mean? It means it's time to hit back. But not with rage. With fact. He sent me a file that night. No explanation. Just an encrypted email labeled DP, Archived Public Record. I downloaded it, expecting some article or grainy news clipping. What I opened, though, was far worse. It was a police report. Not one. 4. All related to Dalton Pierce. All sealed until 2 years ago. Fraud. Intimidation. Alleged coercion of 2 former employees during a corporate merger that resulted in internal lawsuits and a quietly buried settlement. The documents were sanitized. Yes, but they still hinted at manipulation, reputation threats, and carefully avoided investigations. One of the women had filed a protective order. Another had quit the industry altogether and moved out of state. There was even a brief mention of potential obstruction connected to a deleted chain of communications involving Dalton's legal team and a partner suspected of witness interference. That partner? Alina. It was never proven. But it was there, blacked out in most places, buried in footnotes like a ghost no one wanted to dig up. Victor had retrieved it through back channels. He wouldn't say how, but he urged me to use it carefully. This isn't about revenge, he said. This is about giving your son the full truth before they erase you from his life completely. I didn't sleep again. At 5:37 a.m., I printed everything, bound it in a simple manila folder. Then I waited for Braden to come downstairs. He didn't look surprised when I slid it across the table. What is it now? He asked, not coldly, just exhausted. Dalton, I said. Everything you haven't been told. He opened it. Read the first few lines. His expression changed. Not with anger. With disgust. She's with this guy? He asked, pushing the pages back toward me. She knew. I think she did more than just know. I think she helped keep it buried. Braden stood up. Started pacing. So this is it, then. She's not just a stranger. She's dangerous. No, I said quietly. She's still your mother. I won't take that from you. But you need to understand. She's coming back not because she wants you, but because she wants to control the version of you the world sees. She doesn't know who you are now. And frankly, I don't think she ever did. He stared out the window. What if I don't want to go to court? What if I don't want to talk to lawyers or therapists or stand in front of a judge and explain why I'd rather stay with the man I've called dad my whole life? Then we don't let her drag you into it, I said. We take preemptive action. Like what? Like having you file a statement of intent. You're 18 now, legally an adult. You can tell the court who you want in your life and who you don't. You don't have to go through this like a voiceless prop in her comeback movie. He was quiet for a while. Then he said, she doesn't get to walk in, smile for cameras, and rewrite history. She left. She never looked back. You did. I swallowed the emotion rising in my throat. Then let's make that official. We drafted the letter together that night. He wrote it in his own words, nothing scripted, nothing filtered. Just truth. Honest, raw, and impossible to twist. He signed it with shaking hands, but he didn't hesitate. And when we scanned it and sent it to the mediation office listed in her attorney's letter, I saw something in him I hadn't seen in years. Peace. It didn't last long, because the next morning, a black car pulled into our driveway. A man in a gray suit stepped out, holding a courier envelope. I opened the door before he could ring the bell. Delivery for Daryl Penrose, he said, and handed me the envelope. Inside was a single-page notice. Alina Penrose is filing for emergency temporary visitation rights, citing emotional alienation and psychological manipulation by the custodial parent. They were coming harder, dirtier, faster than I thought. But they made one mistake. They underestimated just how much truth we were prepared to expose. The courthouse was a dull gray box with no poetry in its design, just cold walls, humming lights, and the echo of shoes on polished tile. Braden walked beside me, shoulders squared, a suit jacket too tight across his arms because he'd grown since prom. He didn't say much on the ride over. He didn't need to. Everything he felt had already been carved into that letter he'd written, and now it was time to hand it to the system that would try to decide what was in his best interest. Alina arrived 15 minutes late, of course. Always fashionably detached from consequence. She wore a pale blue blouse, minimal makeup, and carried herself like a misunderstood movie star. Dalton was with her, confident, calm, and nodding at everyone like he'd already won. But I noticed the tightness in his jaw when he saw me. I nodded back. No smile. Just acknowledgement. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. Inside the hearing room, the judge, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a voice that didn't waste time, got straight to the point. She reviewed the petition for emergency visitation, glanced at the supporting documentation, and then turned to Braden. You're legally an adult, she said. So your preferences carry legal weight. Would you like to speak on the record? Braden stood. No hesitation. He looked across the room at the woman who had once sung lullabies to him and then walked out of his life like he was background noise. I don't want visitation, he said simply. I don't want reunification. I don't want a staged relationship with someone who only remembered me when it was convenient for her narrative. Alina opened her mouth to interrupt, but the judge silenced her with a glance. I don't hate her, Braden continued, his voice steady. But I don't trust her either. She left without a goodbye. She never came back. And now she's trying to use lawyers to step back into a role she gave away. He turned to me. This man raised me. When she left, he stayed. When I broke down, he was the one who picked me up. I don't care what any paternity test says. He's my dad. The courtroom went still. Alina's face cracked, ever so slightly. That carefully rehearsed composure gave way to something more human, maybe guilt, maybe just the shock of realizing that her control over the narrative had finally dissolved. The judge looked down at her notes, flipped a page, and closed the file. I see no grounds for emergency visitation, she said. Case dismissed. Mr. Penrose, Mr. Braden, you are free to go. We stood slowly. Braden exhaled hard through his nose, a sound halfway between relief and release. As we turned to leave, Alina called out, soft, brittle. Braden, wait. He stopped, turned slightly. She stepped forward, eyes watery now. I made mistakes, she said. More than I can count. But I thought, maybe, someday. You had someday, he said. You gave it away. And he walked out. We didn't talk much on the ride home. The sun was low, casting long gold lines through the windshield. But as we pulled into our driveway, Braden reached over and rested his hand on my shoulder. Thanks for fighting for me, he said. I looked at him, swallowing the emotion that swelled in my chest. You're worth every fight. A week later, life started to feel normal again. Victor dropped by with a gift, a framed photo of Braden and me at graduation, printed in black and white, the kind that feels timeless. We hung it in the living room, right above the fireplace where Alina's last family portrait used to be. Braden applied to a college one state over. Said he wanted to study human behavior. So I can understand people better, he joked. Maybe even my mother someday. I didn't stop him. Growth isn't about forgetting the pain. It's about not letting it be the thing that defines you. As for me, I learned something unexpected. You can lose everything you thought made up your life. You can be betrayed, lied to, rewritten out of your own story. But if you choose love over bitterness, presence over pride, and truth over noise, you can still come out whole. Not the same. Maybe never the same, but whole. And sometimes, that's more than enough.